I'm Jeanine Nodder, and this week on Chattin with Jeanine, my family is here. My brother Lee is to my right, and next to him is our cousin Greg. On the left is my sister Carol and her husband Tony. So some of you longtime listeners and viewers of this show might recall that during COVID, my show was taped on Zoom. And I did a number of shows about the Marines in the South Pacific during World War II. Because my brother Lee's a historian, and he was the guest on all those shows. And then he came back for an hour special on the Cat Marines. And one of the commenters on that show on YouTube, which was my most watched show, actually grew up in Merrimack, New Hampshire. And he's always wanted to come and visit me and see the sights in Boston, because this is where the history of our country began. And he finally made it out and brought our sister, our cousin, brother-in-law, and our niece is in the audience. So Beth is over there. We can see her, but she can't see you. And well, actually, we can't either. But welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Jeanine.
Thank you. We went on the Freedom Trail today, actually. So 2 days of Boston. Still haven't seen everything. And Lee, this was your first time in Boston. What did you think?
Oh, I'm just thrilled. It was a lot of fun. Today, Mother Goose was outstanding.
She was our guide.
That was a tour guide on the Freedom Trail. A really funny lady. But my favorite part was yesterday when we went to the Constitution.
Old Ironsides.
Had a great time on that ship, and got to talk to some of the young sailors on that ship. So that was fun. And those guys knew their stuff. So I was asking them about their cannons, and they were telling me all about it. So.
Well, you know what I like about the Constitution is that when I go below decks, I don't have to duck. I don't think you did either,
Nope.
did you, Lynn?
I sure did not.
Sorry, Carol. Her name's Carolyn. She goes by Carol. I call her Lynn. So.
Now my husband calls me Lynn.
Good job, Tony.
So, Lynn, Carol, this was your second time
Yes.
in Boston. What stood out to you?
I think this time the one thing that stood out to me was the Freedom Trail lines, because since then, my first trip back in 2000, I've been to Berlin, and they've taken the walls out, but there are markers on the ground, bricks, that resembled the lines from our Freedom Trail. So that was kind of cool. I was able to kind of put both of those historical events together. So, gosh, we got lines on the ground for our Freedom Trail, we got bricks on the ground, and my grandson was only like 7, 8 years old back then, and he was straddling the bricks, and I was just picturing him, oh my gosh, he would not have been able to stand there just a few years before that, because the wall was there.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it was
That's
pretty
profound.
cool. And
All right.
there we go.
All right. Greg, I'm going to turn to Cousin Greg over here.
Mm-hmm.
When we first moved to New Hampshire in 1998, our first Easter here, we went to go visit your parents. You were there too. And your mother showed us the Twin Towers. And she said, well, it's old hat to us, but it was really, really exciting to us. So having grown up in New Jersey, how many, have you been to Boston? Is Boston old hat to you?
This was my third trip to Boston.
Boston.
Was, however, the first time I did not go to Fenway Park when I went to Boston. I will add that.
Oh.
Yes, I'm from New Jersey, and I actually saw the Twin Towers fall live and in person.
Oh, my God.
I was at work that day when it happened, and it was a scenic overpass that I drove up to, and it was, the thing that amazed me was that crowd of like 200 people, and you could hear a penny drop. There was not a sound out of anybody. And the first thought I had was, when I watched the towers and the smoke go up, was thank God the wind is blowing in the direction it's blowing, because the wind was blowing all the smoke out to the sea rather than over the island of Manhattan. So that's the first thought I had, was the wind is cooperating and blowing all the smoke out to the sea. Just a terrible, scary day.
I know some of our other cousins, they told me that they knew people that died that day. Very sad piece of history.
Yeah.
Our country. So, I don't know how we follow up. I'm going to turn to my brother-in-law now. Tony, was this your first time in Boston?
Actually, no. This is the second time I've been here. It was 45 years ago that I came to running from Hopkinton to Boston in 1980, and I was overwhelmed going across Wellesley College by all the girls cheering, and I felt as though, even though it was a warm day in April, the cheers of the girls encouraged this 24-year-old so much, it made me feel like I was running on clouds. I also enjoyed taking the T into town, into Boston, from the outskirts of Boston to visit Harvard University and the Boston Red Sox Stadium just days before the marathon. Today, in the last couple days being here, just being able to visit the different historical sites, the buildings, the beautiful hills, the trees that line the city, as well as the waterways, have really impressed me.
Thank you.
Wow.
Lee, I'm going to ask everybody what their favorite era of history is. Does that make sense? Like I'm a Civil War buff. I can't get enough of the Civil War. I'm always reading about the Civil War and World War II. Go ahead, Lee.
Okay, well, I teach college history, and I like it all.
You like all of it.
So I teach Western Civ, and I go all the way back to Sumerians and that, and all the way up to present with American history. My favorite time is my Marines in World War II. That's what I like to study the most. It's all good to me.
Now, both my brother and my sister are veterans, but we thank you for your service, Marines and Army, and my boys are Air Force. And we had an aunt who was in the Navy, so we were doing the math. This is not a good roll-in, but we were sitting around yesterday doing the math on how many people our grandparents are responsible for, and we came up with 136 people. So that's their children and their children's children and our children's children, and there's some greats in there. It totals 136, and we cover all branches of the service several times over. Yeah. Greg, do you have a favorite era of history?
It's a tough call. Like Lee, I'm interested in the Marines and the Pacific and World War II. I also like studying World War I. My grandfather fought for Scotland in the trenches in World War I. And I remember as a young child asking him about it, and he's very nonchalant about it. So I remember asking him, "What did you do?" And he said it was an engineer. And his job was to go up and cut the barbed wire so the men could charge through. And my reaction was, "Oh, that doesn't sound too bad." Well, as I got older and learned and studied more about it, that was a very dangerous thing, because you were going out in the middle of nowhere's land and the snipers were shooting at you. You had the corpses, laying all around you. So he had PTSD, which explained a lot of his late in life behavior, and now I understand why. So World War I is interesting to me as well. But
My youngest son is interested in World War I.
yeah, and the Civil War also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of the battle sites of the Civil War.
I'm jealous. I want to see all the battle sites. How about you, Lynn? Carol?
As a retired fifth grade teacher, I have to say, well, I taught fourth grade too, so Gold Rush, yay.
Oh, yeah.
And U.S. history. I love that. I love bringing the past to life. I really enjoyed bringing it to fifth graders, 10-year-olds, because I don't want them to think that history is just old and dusty, but it's living, it's alive, and we're part of history right now. Every single life is a part of history right now.
That's
So
true.
I like to instill that in my students, or I did until a year ago when I retired.
So, Tony, you married into a history family. We're history buffs. Does history interest you?
History does interest me. Being a retired pastor and teacher, I really enjoy looking at the times between the First World War and the Second World War, that time of the Depression, and the effects that it had on people in America, and the devastation that occurred in many families. And both my mom and dad were raised and born very, very close to that Depression period, and people really hung on to things. They made good use of the things that they had, and didn't look to have so much more as people do today, striving for more and more. The other period is the 70s, working with young people and seeing how the music really affects how we look at life and how we enjoy life sometimes, because it influences us, and it can, in some ways, bring us up and encourage us in our daily lives.
Yesterday, the tour guide was telling some little girl about Cheers, and she didn't know what it was, and he said, well, it was a show that was on TV back in the 1900s. It was just kind of funny, because it's not so long ago for us, but to a kid, it is ancient history, and we're all old. I kind of want to shift gears here now because we have limited time. I really wanted to do 2 shows, one with all of you and one with just Lee, to talk about our dad, because our dad was in Patton's 3rd Army, and he was one of the soldiers that liberated Dachau. And Lee, I think you know the most about Dad. I have his service records, and I have to show them to the good folks at the VFW. Would you like to tell us about Dad and his service?
Well, Dad got drafted, he was 18 years old, so that's 1942. And he's going to end up in the 3rd Army. They sent these guys to England to train and stage there in England. And the 3rd Army was actually a secret, and they didn't reveal what that was until after they had put all of these guys into France. So you may remember the slapping incident with General Patton
Yes.
in Sicily. So they send him back to England, and they announced that he's now in charge of this special army group called the 1st United States Army Group, which was an army group that in reality didn't exist. It was all balloons and cardboard and wood, an elaborate scheme to make the Germans think that they had this huge armada getting ready near Dover, England. So in the meantime, north of that in England, they're building up this force that's going to be the 3rd Army. So Patton is not part of D-Day. He doesn't go into the continent until late in July 1944, and after he's there, then they start sending the guys piecemeal into France to build up the army, and they don't actually announce that they're the 3rd Army until August of 44. And at that point, then they start to break out to head towards the German border. By the end of 44, they're all the way in Belgium and the western part of France, and the winter is setting in, and everybody expected the Germans are going to surrender at any moment now. The Germans got to surrender, you know. But to everybody's surprise and shock,
Battle of the Bulge.
Battle of the Bulge. The Germans come in, an all-out effort, this wild scheme by Hitler. They're going to punch a hole in the Allied lines and push them back to the Atlantic Ocean. A real ironic thing about this is that on the other side of Germany, the Russians are going to come in, and they're going to devastate the East Germans while Hitler's wasting his army in the West, you know. But anyway, that battle lasts over a month, from the middle of December to the middle of January. That's the Battle of the Bulge. Our dad, as part of the 3rd Army, his job was he drove trucks for the Red Ball Express. Red Ball Express was in operation from August 44 to the end of November 44. And their job was to drive these big 2.5-ton trucks to the front to keep the soldiers in the front supplied. About 75% of the drivers were actually African Americans, but not all of them. And our dad was part of that. It's called the Red Ball Express.
Yeah, I heard about the Red Ball Express from the Battle of the Bulge, 1st Rifleman that sat in front of me in Reps Hall my first term.
I remember Dad saying he didn't talk about World War II. He did not talk about his
he didn't.
experiences except for one time. And I don't know if you know this.
I do.
Okay. He said, scared. You know what scared is? It's when you're standing or sitting down behind a wall and you throw a grenade through the window and you're hoping to God that wall does not collapse on you.
Okay, I didn't know you were going to say that. I thought you were going to talk about the time a kid came to our house and said that the Holocaust didn't happen. And then
no, I don't know about that.
Oh, no, he kind
I
of
do have a
exploded.
story on that, too.
Okay.
When my wife Nancy and I were in college, Nancy had to take some extra classes, what do you call that, Len?
Extracurricular.
Extension classes.
Well, go on.
Anyway.
Not part of her
Extra
major,
stuff.
but at any rate, so we went to Cal
Elective.
State Fullerton, and there was a Holocaust class offered. It's taught by a rabbi, and the rabbi's wife had been a Jewish person from Hungary, and her family ended up at Auschwitz, so she's a survivor.
Wow.
And that rabbi had her come and talk to the class. So once in a while, if I had time, I'd go to Nancy just to sit in and listen to that class, right? So now I'm going to reveal to national television. I was telling my brother about that years later, and he laughed. He goes, "Oh, that was all a hoax." And I go, "What? You think that was a hoax?" He said, "Yeah, that didn't really happen." So I told our dad that. Now, to this day, Tim does not know that I told Dad. Okay,
I won't
and
tell him.
Dad hit the roof.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dad
I
hit the
remember.
roof.
Yeah.
So a few years later, I saw Tim. I said, "Do you still think the Holocaust is a hoax?" And he goes, "No, Lee, you know what? I don't know why. Dad came over my house and started yelling at me and hit the
'Cause he
read me
saw
the
it.
riot
He
act."
saw it.
Yeah.
He
yeah.
said,
Dad said, "I saw those camps." That's what he said.
Wow.
Yeah.
and there's other bits and pieces. Our audience member, Beth, her mother said that, who's our sister, she's the oldest, said Dad said one time, he was just thinking about it and said they were so hungry. We fed them and they died anyway. And so there were things that haunted him his whole life, having to see that. He told me about a time where he was, we had guard duty, the POWs, the German POWs. And one of the officers, Germans, took the watch away from the enlisted guy. The enlisted guy was trying to sell his watch to maybe Dad or somebody to get cigarettes or whatever, and the officer took it away from him, and Dad made him give it back and said, "Oh, you're just a prisoner here like him. You're not his officer anymore."
That's
Something
right.
like that.
That's right.
But I hate very little stories because it's just too painful for most servicemen. You were in Vietnam. I don't know your stories either, and I'm not going to ask you to talk about them here. But war is hell.
Well, I just want to make sure that we, as a country, appreciate our servicemen and women because
We do.
they
Amen.
literally do put their lives on the line.
They do.
Yeah.
And you guys can just jump in anytime. So just if you want to add anything.
Well, I remember Lee telling me about his last 2 patrols in Vietnam. The second to last, he had to run from patrol of Vietnamese, and he jumped across a creek, and his gun got jammed with sand. In his last patrol, he just stayed in the back and ate cheeseburgers.
Yeah. Barbecued corn, actually.
My uncle was in the Second World War, and he was a part of the 101st Airborne. He was in the Army, but he was a paratrooper. And on D-Day, his plane flew over France. And because of the cloud cover with no radar on the airplanes, they went a little bit too far into France and were actually parachuting into enemy-occupied France. His platoon of about 16 guys were captured by the Germans, and the place where he landed, it was a farm, and the owner of the farm let them stay in their barn for 3 or 4 days to try to see if there was any groups of allies that they could go to, but they kept seeing these German patrols. They stayed there, and then the leader of the group, lieutenant of the group, said, "We've got to go." And that day they were captured. He spent 9 months in a prisoner.
Wow.
Wow.
But he came home safe. Yes.
Go ahead.
You might not have heard this story, but there was a candidate for president in the United States in 1972, George McGovern, He was actually a B-24 bomber pilot during World War II. And one of my favorite historians, Stephen Ambrose, wrote a book called The Blue Yonder. And he tells the story about George McGovern, where they were stationed in Italy and they had to go up and bomb in Austria. But they couldn't get to their target, so they had to turn around and come back, and then they could not come back into Italy and land with the bombs, so they had to jettison the bombs. So we let the bombs go, and he said, to my horror, I saw the bombs go down and hit a farmhouse.
Wow.
And he said that just haunted him his whole life. Now, about 50 years later, he was a guest back in Austria, of all places, and he was telling that story, and the TV station got a call from a guy that said, that was my farm, I was a child there, and I want Mr. McGovern to know we all knew he had no choice, but that those bombs were going to help shorten the war.
Wow.
What a story.
That is a good story. I have notes from a speech that I gave in Toastmasters and also on the House floor about D-Day, and I just glanced down, and I have in here, it says, my dad once told me that there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole. Do you find that to be true as well, being a Vietnam veteran?
Wow, you put me on the spot, Jeanine.
Sorry.
Because
Jeanine.
by the end of my tour in Vietnam, I kind of went the other way. All right, and I didn't start coming back this way till I met a girl in college. And some of the things that she would say, I said, well, what are you, a Jesus freak? And she said, yeah, I guess I am. So she and I could be married 53 years this year.
That was
Wow.
Nancy.
Yeah, I think that'll probably last.
I think that's okay. I think it's okay to be on a journey.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Actually, I know a lot of really devout Christians who had a period of time where they were atheists. A lot of people.
Because you come back stronger.
We have about 4.5 minutes left. See, I told you it goes by really, really fast. But you were talking about Nancy and the class that she took on the Holocaust. And my formative years, 10, 11, 12, I spent a lot of time at your house. We ate a lot of ice cream and drank a lot of Diet Coke, but or maybe it was Diet Pepsi, I don't remember. But what I do remember is sitting in the kitchen and Nancy telling me about the Holocaust, all those stories, and I would remember all of them. And I read many, many books. I cannot count the number of books that I've read on World War II and the Holocaust, and also watched the documentaries. And I give a speech every year at a Second Amendment rally, and one of those speeches was about that, sitting in the kitchen with Nancy and talking about that, because I've always been pro-Second Amendment, and that's part of the reason why, because being a kid, you're thinking, well, why didn't they fight back? Why didn't they fight back? Oh, because the government took their guns away. So I didn't mean to go off political, but it just rolled with it. So we have to wrap it up. We've got about 3 minutes left. Is there anything anybody wants to add to the show that we didn't, or bring it back to Boston and...
Okay, I'll bring it back to Boston. Okay, because I was thinking, back in 2000, I walked the whole entire Freedom Trail with my two sons. They were 18 and 20 years old, and that was the most wonderful time. I remember walking, it was hot, of course, it was summertime. We're walking up Bunker Hill, up those rolling hills, and by the time we got to the USS Constitution, they were more tired than I was. And it just reminds me how, I guess I'm going to tie it together here, it reminds me how important family is. That 136 people, that's no small potatoes,
There's a lot of us.
There's a lot of us, and I think it's an honor and blessing to be able to relive history a little bit with each other.
And we're part of the population explosion.
Yes,
we are.
I get teased by a lot of my friends and colleagues, like, but you have family everywhere. Everywhere you go, you have family there. I'm like, there's a lot of us. Well, hey, I'm so glad you all came out to visit, and I'm going to miss you when you go home. I think you all should move here. But I usually shake the hands of my guests when they come on the show, but that seems kind of weird because we
have to get a hug.
Family. Yeah.
My
My
baby
big
sister.
My big sister and my big brother.
Yeah.
And you can just pass that on down.
Okay.
Passing Greg
her
and
hug
can, Brother Tony and Beth and our audience. Thank you for being our wonderful audience member, Beth. You can give us your critique after the show. Now I'm going to take these folks down the road and show them the grave of the last person to sign the Declaration of Independence. And if you live in Merrimack, New Hampshire, you already know who that is, Matthew Thornton. Thank you for watching.